Hello, friends, and welcome back to Weird Wednesdays. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I've got 5 true stories and reports where listeners have encountered real reptilian humanoids. On a narrator's note, I personally found story 5 to be especially unsettling. And when we get there, I think you will too. So strap up, grab your boots, and let's ride. Dear Tattooed Biker, I had a strange experience once and I wanted to share. You see, my dog and I used to sit out on the doorstep at night and watch this gigantic white owl that would make this clicking sound, like clock, clock, clock. It would roost in a huge oak tree across the street. Anyway, I saw an Asian man walking up the sidewalk around 3 a.m. smoking a cigarette by holding it under, European style, and one arm behind his back. As he passed me, he nodded, so I nodded back. I thought it strange being so late. Then he walked around the corner and was gone. A week later, my dog and I saw the same man appear in the same place a block and a half to the east, smoking a cigarette in that weird way. This time, when he walked by, he smiled and said very softly and meekly, "Hello," and bowed his head. I returned the same hello and bowed my head. His hard-soled shoes would make a clatter in the still of the night. In this small rural farming town, virtually no one was out. A week after that, I slept with the double front doors open into my studio apartment for ventilation and listening to crickets and bullfrogs. At around 3 a.m., I heard the sound of the man walking closer as he got to my door. He then stopped and turned and looked at me laying on my mattress on the floor. This time he had a hooded jacket and a reptilian face. We both just stared at each other for about 10 seconds. I was examining his face and noticed that he had eye sockets but no eyes. He had a brow ridge and a small slit for a mouth. The scales looked like those of a snake and had a bluish-black color to them. He turned and continued walking, but he wasn't smoking a cigarette this time, though he had the same walking sound, clattering, and it faded away. That was the last time I saw him. Please don't use my name. Signed, Anonymous. Number 2. Dear TB, this one time I was driving along Bonneview Road in DeSoto, Texas at around 1 p.m. The date was March 3rd, 2014. There had previously been a UFO sighted on the street that runs parallel to it just a few weeks prior to this incident. There's a field where cattle have supposedly been abducted and mutilated, according to the owners, which was reported to our local sheriff and publicized in the media. It's fenced in and there's no way to go inside, aside from going in illegally, of course. I stopped next to this field along Bonneview Road to look at a white horse which seemed as if it was spooked by something. Next thing I know, I saw a human-like creature with scales, which I can only describe as reptilian, which was lying on the ground. It then suddenly stood up and walked deeper into the fenced area. I was completely shocked by this, though there was still a huge distance between me and the creature. I don't think it even noticed me looking at it. I didn't know whether to just leave or contact the police or what. But within seconds, a very mysterious disc-shaped craft quickly dropped down to the ground in the direction that the creature was walking. It descended so fast that it was hard to even see. It appeared to be enclosed in a large bubble of water and only stayed on the ground for a few seconds. The bubble around it was glowing in a cloak of fading light. It was like it just kept trying to hide. Suddenly, it rose up into the sky and disappeared. I wasn't able to take any pictures since my phone was out of power, but I know for a fact this really happened. The trees around the area looked as if they had been hit by a really strong wind. I decided to drive away as quickly as possible. I contacted the sheriff and reported the incident to MUFON and another reporting site. To this day, I've never heard back from anyone, as if they simply didn't want to acknowledge what had happened. I'm glad you're willing to listen. Signed, Michael. Number 3. Dear TB, I have a story that I think you'd find interesting. You see, in 1976, I was in 3rd grade. That spring, my elementary school class went on a field trip to Smith Memorial Playground and Playhouse, located at North 33rd Street and Oxford Street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We boarded the buses and headed to the Fairmount Park section of the city. The Smith Playground has been around since the 1800s, and it has the world's largest wooden sliding board. Our class arrived for the day's fun using the slide and having fun with other school kids that were also on class trips. Some of my classmates and I became bored, so we decided to make our own fun. We scaled a fence to another section of the playground, where we came upon a swimming pool area. In this area, we can see that the pool hadn't been used in years. There were so many leaves in the pool that its color was dark green. We began throwing rocks in the pool until we again became bored, so we scaled another fence. This next area had a pathway to our right. As we began to walk down the pathway, I heard a female voice from behind me say, "Stop, children." When I looked back, there was this green lady hanging from this tree. When she came out of the tree, I can see that she had scaly skin like a lizard. Her skin had a design pattern, which covered her from top to bottom, as if her skin was also her clothes. She walked on 2 feet, and she had a small slit for a mouth. When she spoke to us, we could hear her in our heads. Her mouth never seemed to open or even move. We quickly rushed back over the fences, and I've never been back. I can't remember all my classmates that were there. After 40-plus years of questions, I found one classmate that remembers the incident. There were probably 5 or 6 of us. Through some research, I found an article from the Times Daily Google News Archive, dated October 6, 1959, which describes an incident about a green lady chasing school children with a knife. This doesn't fit the description or the same green lady that appeared to us. I honestly believe that I witnessed something truly amazing and out of this world. Thanks for reading. Signed, Hank. Number 4. Hey TB, I have a story from a long time ago, but I wanted to share it. In August 1959, my parents and I were traveling to Colorado Springs, Colorado on a vacation. For some unknown reason, Dad decided that we would stop and visit Mount Capulan, an extinct volcano in the northeast corner of New Mexico. Mom stayed in the tourist center, while Dad and I climbed up the side of the volcano and down into the crater. Then we returned to the visitor center. As I was walking through the tourist center, I felt myself stop in mid-step. I could feel my consciousness lift out of my body and drop straight through the floor. How deep, I can't imagine. My drop ended in an arched tunnel, deep underground. The tunnel was lighted with orange lights. Standing in front of me was a smallish being or entity that I now know to identify as a reptilian. I would estimate its height at somewhere between 4 feet tall and 5 feet tall. It was wearing a gray color robe with long sleeves and a hood. The most I could see of its face was its intense, oversized dark eyes. In its left hand, number of fingers unclear, but it definitely had a thumb, it held something that looked similar to what today we would describe as an iPad or the like. In its right hand, it held some kind of stylus. It looked straight at me, and with mind-to-mind talk said, "What are you doing here? We're not ready for you yet." Then my consciousness zoomed back up through the ground and back into my head where I stood, confused, in the tourist center. Since then, I've wondered when the we that this alien entity represented would be ready for me. I've had other encounters with UFO-related entities, like MIB, dressed in a black warrant officer's uniform, driving a yellow Mini Cooper on the military base in Iceland. He told me go home and pointed towards the southwest end and North America. Maybe the aliens' entities have visited me, but I don't remember it. Ready is a term that has shown up in many stories about CE3. I'm very much on my guard for when this world shows up because of this encounter, which the word was spoken to me by the reptilian. Thanks for reading. Signed, Ethan. Number 5. Dear Biker, I have a story that happened to me in my youth that I really need to share as it's haunted me ever since. You see, I was born in a tiny town in Ohio that borders the Ohio River in West Virginia in 1979. I have one brother who's just 2 years older than me. We'll call him Charlie here. My mom left my dad in 1983 and she moved me and Charlie to a town in the Rocky Mountains. We had to stay at our hotel the first few days there, but it ended up being only one night before my mom got us out of this place because of what happened. We didn't arrive at the hotel until dark. Even when we got into the place, I was noticing the energy was different than anything that I'd ever felt before. I remember telling my mom I didn't want to stay there, and both Charlie and my mom laughed and said it would be okay. The place was small. It felt compact and like the walls were closing in on you. Because it was built in the 1870s. I have proof, I did the research. Either way, our room was on the second floor. It overlooked an Amtrak railway and the Colorado River. It was on the south end of town. The place was originally constructed for low-income housing, and boy, it was still cheap. Even into my teenage years, I think the price for a room there was only $30. Cheap, run down, and dirty. My mom was getting us and herself ready for bed. I think my brother and I were going to pick out a board game to play while my mom got herself ready as well. Our room had a bathroom. Most of the rooms didn't. They had to share one at the end of the hall. The lights were dim in the room. Only a lamp by the bed was on. Not even the bathroom light. My mom was washing her face in the sink, and as Charlie and I were messing around like kids do, he said, "Stop. Listen." We both stopped and focused in on what she was doing, and started to hear a low sort of growling, a very low and very angry growling. My mom had her face in the sink, and was now violently splashing water onto her face, which seemed like it was literally forever. Then swung her head up, stood up straight, and looked at her own reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were opened really wide, and her mouth was grinning, but not in a happy way. I mean, she was baring all her teeth, and then started laughing. This is where it gets super freaky, if that isn't freaky enough for you already. I mean, my mom was pretty nice. Still looking in the mirror, she looks over to us sitting on the bed through the reflection. She starts laughing harder and growling even more now. It didn't sound anything like her. She turned around and faced us, and it wasn't even her anymore. It was a reptilian creature that stood about 9 feet tall. It didn't have any clothes on from what I could see, but my brother and I both saw its features in detail. Scaly green skin, bright orange-yellow eyes, bright red around its mouth. Not sure if I want to call those lips. Lots of extremely sharp and pointed teeth. long, sharp black talons, and long, curly black hair. It was completely horrifying. My brother and I started screaming at the top of our lungs. I hid behind him and started crying uncontrollably. I've never felt fear like that since then or after, and I'm 41 now. I'd say it got about halfway to the bed where we were sitting, and it was talking to us. More like growling and grunting, and saying how hungry it was, and how tasty we were going to be. I just kept screaming and screaming and screaming and trying not to open my eyes because every time I did, it was still there, getting a little closer each time I opened them. My brother had a hold of me too and was probably screaming just as loud. Once it got halfway to us, we heard an extremely loud knock at the door. "Everything okay in there? Hello, hello?" They knocked for a minute or two, and Charlie and I were looking over at the door. When we turned to look back, the thing, it was gone. My mother just stood there, in a complete daze like what had just happened. In total shock, she ran over to us and hugged us, and asked if we were okay, and was crying. I was still crying, of course. I was a little kid, and my mom just turned into this thing that I can't explain. Charlie was crying his eyes out too. She hugged us and said, I promise I'll never do that again." She had her face in my neck, and I thought, monster. Then she started to growl, and I started to cry again, but she laughed and stopped and said, "Promise, last time." She got up and answered the door and explained there was a mouse. Sorry for the noise. All the while, the sink was still running. It was raining pretty heavily that night, too, come to think of it. We left the next morning, and Charlie and I spoke about this for years. Hell, we even interrogated our mom about it for years. And we would never get a straight answer. The only answer she would give was, "I don't want to talk about that." Not, "What are you talking about?" or "That was a dream," or "We need to get you tested for schizophrenia." None of that. "I don't want to talk about that." When I was about 13, my brother literally forgot it happened. He didn't remember one single thing about it until literally this past year when I talked with him about it again, and he started remembering as I told the story to him. He had forgotten it for over 25 years, completely blocked it out of his memory. Well, when I was 17, she did talk about it. I asked her one night, and she explained everything. She said she felt like something entered her and took her over. She didn't remember anything until she was standing there in a daze, except darkness and trying to reach us to keep us safe. Then she said something that confirmed everything. But I never did it again, did I? The hotel has been demolished and rebuilt. It's now a massage parlor, which is kind of funny because it used to be a whorehouse, a speakeasy, and then low-income housing. Back to a massage parlor. Can you please tell me if reptilians can possess someone? Or is she naturally a reptilian? I can't find a picture or even a rendition of anything that it resembled. Just to be clear, I am of sound mind. I don't see reptilians or reptile people on a regular basis, although that image has been burnt in my memory forever. Thanks for reading. Signed, Anonymous. And there it is. 5 true encounter stories with reptilian humanoids. What are these things? Cryptids? Aliens? Or maybe something else entirely? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, if you have a story or encounter with the unexplained that you'd like to share, send it to the email in the description, and your story just might be in a future video. So thanks for watching. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker out.